Okay. Pog. Got that one. We got that one. The other one would be this one. Let me pull up some pages here. I think it's weatheringwaves.gg. Yes. Ouch. Excuse me. Oh, my computer is lagging. Am I still liking ZZZ and playing it? Yes, I've just been very passively in the background doing dailies because I've been really busy. But I do plan to play it more, possibly grind through some of it tonight. We will see what happens. It's my casual game. You know, I'm not making a lot of videos on it. I will, but I'm not a shit ton. It's kind of my for fun little casual game. Cute characters, cool animations type thing. I'm really more invested in Wuthering Waves. I also need to be practicing Tekken because I quite literally have a tournament in today's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 4 days. I have 4 days to practice Tekken and get ready for that tournament, and I'm a little out of practice, so that needs to happen pretty quickly. But yeah. Okay. I was wrong about Jinshi versus Changli in my last video. Ever since the leaks had turned into reality, and we actually got the characters in the game, I've been getting flamed about some of the things I said that were wrong. This is my response video to that because I was very, very, very wrong. And honestly, I was a little disappointed because some of the leaks seemed really, really awesome, and it's a little different now, but it is what it is. And I feel obligated to make a follow-up video to this because there was some misinformation spread, and I don't want anybody pulling off of what that previous video mentioned. So we're going to get into it today. Jinshi versus Changli, who should you pull in Wuthering Waves before Changli comes out in about should be about 6 days from now, from the recording of this video at least. And 6 days left on Jinshi's banner. So the biggest things that I'd gotten wrong between Jinshi and Changli was the stacking of how Jinshi worked and some of Changli getting reworked around with some stats. So for Jinshi, instead of 40 stacks of her Forte circuit, she has 50. So she has a little bit more damage scaling per stack than or a little more stacks to scale. I believe her scaling was toned down, especially at S6, which we'll get into in a little bit. Jinshi also is not 1 stack per element per 3 seconds or 1 second after outro buff. It's 1 stack per element and 2 extra stacks if it's a coordinated attack. So Yinlin Electro coordinated attack, that's 3 stacks per lightning strike. Yanwu, multiple stacks per punch, pretty much. Very, very, very fast generation. It is no longer particularly a problem. It's not going to take nearly as long as I had initially said. It takes maybe 10 seconds to fully stack the character now with proper team building. So much, much faster. Going in to S2, when you restore the incandescent stacks while staying out of combat for more than 4 seconds, this is not while just not attacking or not, getting hit. This is while not aggroed on an enemy. So you can't just wait 4 seconds and then get the max stacks and do it again, and Jinshi just is on-field permanent DPS every 4 seconds dealing 100,000 damage, right? Because that's ridiculous. It is only out of combat, which basically means in between TOA runs and in between fighting overworld mobs, it is a nice quality of life change. It is not important for the character's kit whatsoever. Her S1 damage increase and her S6 massive damage increase matter way more. Speaking of, her S6, the damage multiplier of her skill is increased by 45%, and the additional damage multiplier gained by consuming incandescence is increased by 45%. This is also different than it used to be. The way it used to be was she'd gain skill damage bonus, and then she would gain damage per stack, effectively doubling her damage. It was more, it was like 71%. They nerfed her on release because she was hitting for millions of damage. Like 12 million damage maxed out S6R5. Level 90. It was ridiculous. So they toned her down. The additional damage multiplier gained by consuming incandescence is increased by 45%. And only 45% damage multiplier. So a little toned down, a little bit more balanced. Overall, still like probably the most important sequence she can get though. It's a massive damage increase for her on top of S1. It's just stupid. It's a massive amount of damage. But the biggest thing being her S2 is not like every 4 seconds she just blows things up. She's much quicker on rotation. She is probably the most free to play limited event character DPS in the game at the moment because you get most of her supports for free or for like Yuanwu and Baizha and you're done. That's the team. And you get both of them for free. And that team works great. So there are very cheap options and the expensive options don't really increase her own damage as much as it increases the overall damage on the rotation. So you're not missing out on a lot if you really invest and hyper focus your Jinshi. Very, very good character. Her weapon is crit rate scaling, gives attribute damage bonus, and a bunch of skill damage bonus. This weapon's very, very good. It is not the be-all end-all for the character, right? If you have like the Verdant Summit from Gion, that works just fine. And you could probably get away with a Autumn Trace for the most part at S5 or S1. It doesn't matter. She can't use the passive, but just for the crit rate and the stats anyways. But very, very good weapon. This weapon hasn't really changed much. Very worth it. Jinshi so far sitting as like one of the best most pull characters on an account. I'd say Yinlin is still slightly better just because sub DPSs tend to stay prevalent for longer. But Jinshi both being the Archon of Huanglong and of the city of Jinzhou, as well as being just a really cool character and a very, very strong nuclear damage dealer who will eventually, I think, transition into being like a dual DPS team when we have a character that deals coordinated attacks while dealing good on-field damage themselves, right? Jinshi's going to stay very prevalent for a very long time. She's probably my second most prevalent must-pull character in the game currently under Yinlin. Her weapon, not so much. We've got a lot of really good options for the Broadblades, but it is still very, very good for her and gives you a little bit of flexibility on her echo builds. Overall, Jinshi, very, very good character. Going to Changli, not too much has changed for her, but some of her stats have been moved around. Okay. We're going to start with her weapon, actually. Her weapon is now, instead of attack and attack percent with crit rate in the passive, it is now attack and crit damage percent with attack percent in the passive. You get attack percent in the passive and a bunch of skill damage. This is the same as it was before. So they just maneuvered some of the stats. We're getting attack percent in the passive and crit damage main stat. They did this to buff her because she was underperforming in the beta versus Jinshi. As well as specifically for Changli, her S2 now increases her crit rate instead of her crit damage during inflamement, which means if you have 75% crit rate base and you get her S2, she almost always has 100% crit rate uptime, very similar to like S6 Havoc Rover, where as long as you're in that form, you get another 25%. Inflamement, basically every 8 seconds, you get 25% more crit rate. Her rotation's fast enough that after starting, she'll have this pretty much full uptime for her rotation. Very, very nice sequence. Sequences mattering for her, mostly S1's a nice just 1.1 times damage boost on her skill and heavy. S2 is nice for the crit rate. S3 is nice damage increase for her ult. It's not a lot, but it is nice. Intro skill increasing attack percent is nice. Not a lot, but it's nice. S5 increasing multiplier and damage dealt is nice. And S6 is the big one, dealing another 40% defense shred on most of her attacks, which adds up to 55% with her base 15% defense shred. So, with the changes in mind, where do I put Changli? I want to say, out of personal bias for defense shred, because in Punishing Gray Raven and other games where it's existed, it is absurdly broken, right? We also have to think about the fact that we can only get level 90 characters. Every level our opponents are above us, they gain effective defense against us, which she shreds, evening that playing field on the higher level enemies, such as the middle bosses in the TOA. I think Changli on release should be considered a must-pull unit, because A, she can be a dual/sub DPS with her outro for any other fusion DPS to ever come out, pretty much. So she retains value on her outro. She's an amazing fast sub DPS/dual DPS option. And she can be played with pretty much 100% on-field uptime as a main DPS as well. She's also relatively easy to build, because all you really need is crit stats, and everything else kind of handles itself from her kit. And she seems relatively easy to play. I do not think she's going to get power crept for a very long time, at least directly. Like, again, she has so many options. I think she's probably going to become the highest pull value character in the game as we go into the future, because of the defense shred on her attacks, as well as the fact that she can be played in almost every role on the team. That being said, for right now, I want to say that she is probably on par with Jinshi for pull value. Under Yinlin. And Zheji coming out soon, probably above them as well. Zheji's probably going to be the biggest pull value character in the game going forwards for a while, because she's going to be the best Glacio damage dealer in general, because we don't really have a good one right now, as well as being a Glacio sub DPS that handles everything that Yinlin does, but for Glacio. You know, she'll be on par with Yinlin. I want to say that Changli will be on par with Yinlin as well, but it is yet to be seen how much that defense shred is actually going to make a difference and how much it'll matter in the long run. Should you pull Jinshi or Changli with about 5 days left on Jinshi's banner? Personally, I'm saving and building Changli on the side. I have her built already and saved up. She will be level 80 with her weapon, max talents, day 1. I also pulled Jinshi because Jinshi is a lot of fun, a very cute character, the most fun in the roguelike mode I've had. Very, very awesome character. And I already had Gion's weapon, because I also have Gion and I also have Yinlin, because I've gotten very, very lucky. Should you pull Jinshi or Changli? I think it depends on the type of character you want at this point. Do you want the cuter, slimmer, more nuke DPS, smaller, more story prevalent so far character on your account? Do you need a Spectro damage dealer? You know, do you need this option? Pull Jinshi. If you want a very strong fusion DPS that just outclasses Encore at this point, can be played in many roles, hot, quite literally, pun intended, uncooked chicken, it's a phoenix, she's a phoenix, right? Very hot character. Taller, cool, the parasol, more like Japanese esque in nature, with the like basically katana, right? Basically katana and like Demon Slayer-esque Rengoku vibes. Pull Changli. It is hard to say who is a better value pull for an account at the moment. Everyone's going to say online Jinshi's goated, but we don't know. Changli keeps up with Jinshi in damage output for the most part. She's just more damage over time than Jinshi is. Jinshi's a lot more burst. So if Jinshi gets better and better supports, Jinshi will be able to deal more and more damage as a team during the rotation, which increases Jinshi's value. Changli, should she get better supports, Zheji supports them both great, as well as just any other character that outro for skill damage bonus supports them great. You know, as Changli gets better and better supports, she also gets better, but at a slightly different pacing, because Her damage needs to be amplified as the main damage dealer for the team. Jinshi, though, wants more damage dealers in the team that can still charge her, right? Jinshi is a straight up damage nuke. Changli is going to be a damage over time with some defense shred, and we still have to see where we lie. At S0, I think that their pull value is even. At higher sequence levels, I think at sequence 1, Jinshi edges out Changli considerably, actually. I think Jinshi gets a big boost from her sequence 1, and Changli does not get much of one. At sequence 2, depending on build quality, Changli critting almost every time while still retaining a bunch of crit damage from her weapon and also subs. So you'd be at a like 75%, 250% build, and now you're at 100%, 250%. It is a nice boost to your build value. And it's enough of a boost that you could even go up to 300% crit rate if you wanted to go that way instead, and have this bring you up from 50% or 30% to 55, 60% crit rate while you're in Inflamement, and you get a massive crit damage boost when you do crit, if you want to play a little bit more of a gamble, right? I think S2, Changli catches up a bit, but I still think Jinshi at S1 is better and more consistent. S3, S4, S5 pretty much don't matter for any of these characters. We're not going to really talk about these because these are just flat buffs for them across the board. Getting to S6, I think, is where Changli edges out Jinshi. Jinshi gets a big damage boost. It's pretty much doubling her damage output from S0. Or even from S1, technically, because the S1 buff, you know, and then this on top of it, right? Pretty much doubling her damage output. But Changli is more than doubling her damage output on her big hits, her skill, heavy, and ult. Because she's now shredding instead of 15%, 55%. And the more defense you shred, the more exponential damage you deal. 10% defense shred is not going to be like a 10% damage boost, right? It's going to be a little bit less than that. But 50% defense shred is a 2x multiplier to all your damage that you deal, because you're shredding half of their defense. And this is even a little bit more than that, right? So your heavy, skill, and ult. She's a very balanced damage output character, similar to Havoc Rover, so that almost all of her main damage sources are now increased, right? Very, very, very strong. Very strong. She basically is critting for 200% crit damage on top of all of the damage she's already dealing. I think that this increases her damage output more long-term than Jinshi. Because again, Jinshi's damage is doubling, but she's still being held back by the level difference, which is increasing the boss's defense against us. Plus, we might get really bulky bosses in the future, very defense-heavy bosses. Changli at S6 shreds straight through them. Doesn't matter what level, doesn't matter how bulky. You might as well be an overworld enemy, a little squishy enemy, maybe an elite enemy worth of defense, worth of tankiness to Changli at S6. I think S6 Changli edges out Jinshi massively, by a massive margin going into the future. But that is just my opinion on how defense shred works. Honestly, at S6 for right now where we are in the game, Jinshi still probably a better DPS option. But we will see where the game goes from here. Take it from me, who's played many, many gacha games before this. Defense shred, debuffing the enemy instead of just straight up buffing yourself, begins to matter a lot. A lot more than self buffs. Debuffing the enemy multiplies way better than self buffs do in the long term. I think S6 Changli is absolutely broken. And I think that it is probably the best DPS character in the entire game at any sequence level. S6 Changli is the best DPS in the entire game at the moment. My personal opinion. But if you do not believe that defense shred is going to be as important in Wuthering Waves, Jinshi S6, massive. Jinshi basically has Changli the whole way through. The only time is S2 for Changli. If you want that crit rate and the consistency it brings, could be a very good investment. And S6 for Changli is an absolutely massive landslide of an investment that you should be aiming towards, possibly, if not now, on future reruns. Right? But that is going to be it for me for today. If you want to watch me do these live, watch at twitch.tv/Cashy Swanson. Same exact handle as I have on YouTube and all my other social medias. And go ahead and let me know in the comment sections below if I fixed what I had talked about last time, since we now have the new characters information released to us since they've been released with this update. And I hope to see you guys in the next one for 1.2.